A'udzubillahiminasyaitanirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is the discussion or the online lecture for the next topic for our subject public speaking AAD3193. The topic will be about gathering materials for our speech as a public speaker. So for this particular topic, I hope that you can refer to chapter 7 in Lucas textbook. We move on to the learning outcomes. After reading this chapter, you should be able to, number 1, explain how drawing on their own knowledge and experience can enrich their speeches. Number 2, explain the major resources available for researching speeches in the library. Number 3, explain how to use the internet for speech research efficiently and responsibly. Number 4, delineate the 3 stages of interviewing and explain the responsibilities of the interviewer at each stage. And the last learning outcome is, I hope that you can follow the tips for doing research discussed in this particular chapter. We move on to the first part of this chapter, using your experience and knowledge as a public speaker. A speaker's own knowledge and experience can be a valuable resource for information on a speech topic. Why? Because we as a public speaker, we are familiar enough with several parts of sections in our speech. We have our experience, we have our expertise, we have our knowledge on those things. For instance, you are a counseling student, so because your speech is about counseling, you might want to use your experience as a young counselor. You want to use your experience, your knowledge with your lecturers in your class, in your lectures, to put it in your speech, and you can explain it better when you are having your speech by using your experience and knowledge. So, according to Lucas A, we usually speak best about topics with which we are familiar. We are not being alienated with specific jargons. We are not being alienated with things that we don't know. So when we talk with whatever we know in our head, whatever we experience in our life, so we usually can speak best about the topics. And then supplementing facts and figures from books with personal experience can add color and emotion to a speech. Maybe you are been given a task to speak in front of students, school students, about motivation. So it's easier for you to put in information based on your reading of motivational books, books about motivation by theorists and so on. So you can put in the color, your own emotion, the topic's emotion, your feelings to that particular speech. Okay, this is an additional information. Locate and evaluate information sources. According to several other writers of public speaking books, we always put in our justification to locate and evaluate any information sources before we start our speech or before we put those information in our speech. So when we talk about evidence, we need to find evidence. Why? Because this is any information that clarifies, explains, or otherwise adds the depth or breadth to a topic that we want to deliver. When we talk about primary research, this is the process of collecting data about your topic directly from the real world. Your personal knowledge and experience is one of the primary research. And then when we talk about secondary research, it is the process of locating information that has been discovered by other people. About primary research, when there is little secondary research available on your topic or on a main idea you want to develop in your speech, or when you wonder whether what you are reading about is actually true in a particular setting. So primary research may be necessary. So among the things in the category of primary research can be fieldwork observations. You go to a place, you have your eye observation on the phenomenon happened in that particular place. So this is one of the kind of fieldwork observations. Or you go to a community, you do some program. So along the program days, you do some small researches, interviews, and so on. So this can be categorized as fieldwork observations. You observe what happened to the community, the behaviors, the attitudes, the outcomes, and so on. So these are the things in fieldwork observations. And then surveys, interviews, or original artifact or document examinations. You go to any library and you look into several books, original books, to be the primary research material. Okay, and then experiments. You are not having any experiments in lab, for instance. So you are having your experiment in your family lab ataupun counselling lab. So this can be included as what we call as primary research. So be aware, however, that primary research is much more labor intensive, sangat penat, because you need to go and do interviews, for instance. You need to wait to disseminate surveys and get the responses. So this is much more labor intensive and time consuming than secondary research. So what is actually secondary research? It look that secondary research is much more easier compared to primary research in order to get the information. So let us look into secondary research. So secondary research sources, here, as you conduct your search for secondary sources, you will want to draw from a variety of types. You can find information like in encyclopedias, books, newspaper, and periodical articles, and others. So the textbook provides many specific examples of encyclopedias, electronic databases, biographies, book of quotation, and similar references. Alright, now we move on to the next part in this particular topic, doing library research. Library research is an important source of material for speeches. If we look into the librarians, the person who work in the library, so librarians are an excellent resource. Why? Because they know what the sources of information that we want from the library. They can help us. They can assist us straightly. So whenever you go to a library, if you stuck somewhere in any aisle, okay, or in any section of the library, so get the assistance from a librarian, and they will help you to get straightly to the things that you want. And then the catalog list, all the books, periodical, and other resources owned by the library. This can be found, inshallah, in any online catalog in library. Offline catalog in library. And then reference works contain a wealth of information about almost any kind of topic. For examples, encyclopedias, yearbooks, quotation books, and biographical aids. So I hope that you can read about this further later. Okay, when we're doing library research, okay, the next thing is newspaper and periodical databases are invaluable for research on many topics. A lot of past studies had also been reviewing things in newspaper and periodical databases, which helps them to enrich the ideas of their research. And as a public speaker, if you are having your research by looking into newspaper and periodical databases, it really helps in terms of giving you a good data of whatever things that you want to deliver in your speech. And then academic databases are the best way to find scholarly research nowadays. So you can find easily academic databases from the library or from the internet through journal articles, okay, and so on. Okay, we move on to searching the internet. When used responsibly and efficiently, the internet can be a powerful tool for your speech research. Search engines are the key to finding materials on the internet. Among the search engine yang biasa kita gunalah, Google, apa lagi, Alta Vista, okay, Firefox, Yahoo, and so on. Government resources allow instant access to an endless number of government documents and publications as long as it is not restricted, okay, because of law and regulation, right? And then Wikipedia can be a valuable online resource when it is used critically and in conjunction with other research materials. But for me, Wikipedia is something that can give you only a clue, but it is not really reliable. Why? Because in Wikipedia, anyone at any time from anywhere can alter the contents of something. It can alter the contents of information in Wikipedia. So when there is no reliability, so the information can be questioned. Okay, so I hope that you put in your mind that Wikipedia is not a true sources. It's not a true source for you to rely on. You need to have a reading on Wikipedia just for the sake of getting the idea only. But you need to be tabayun enough. You need to find any other sources which is more reliable than Wikipedia. And then there are 3 primary criteria for evaluating the quality of documents you found on the internet. Take a good care of these 3 primary criteria. Number 1, you need to look into the authorship. If possible, you should assess the objectivity and expertise of a document's author. For instance, you open a blog, okay, and you don't know the credential of that particular blog. So always look into the author's objectivity and expertise. For instance, that blog been managed by an academic Islamic scholar, which well known, okay, by the public, by the community. So the writings in the blog, okay, can be an objective enough. Okay, it is written by expertise, well known. So the authorship is clear there. But if you found a website which has no author and they put things maybe that can create some questions in your head, okay, about the information, so the authorship issue here will actually not helping us, okay, to understand things and to refer to that particular website. Number 2, sponsorship. If there is no identifiable author, okay, so you should assess the sponsoring organization that produced the document. So when you found any website or blogs which has no authors, but there are a lot of sponsors, okay, which develop the life of that particular website or blog, so it can be an authentic source, okay, of information for you. And the third one is the recency issue. So regardless of authorship or sponsorship, it is important to check the recency of the document. So make sure that the issue of recency or it is up to date, okay, not obsolete. Okay, the idea is not been written maybe 30 years ago or 60 years ago, and it is not reliable for you because the recency issue, it is not the recent publication or the recent source for you to make points, okay, for your own speech. So make sure that recency is one of the primary criteria that you take care of. Alright, next we move on to interviewing. Why we need to know about interviewing in this particular topic? Because we are doing interview to get primary resource, okay. So interviewing people with specialized knowledge is another way to gather materials for your speech. The first stage in the interviewing process takes place before the interview. So you need to take a good care of these particular things. Okay, you need to check each of these things. Okay, number 1, the interview process begins when a speaker formulates a purpose for the interview. So you need to tell the whole story, okay, the whole thing about your interview to your interviewee, okay, the one that you try to interview, okay, so that they can have a clear picture of whatever you want to get from them. Number two, once the purpose of the interview is clear, so a speaker must decide whom to interview and set up an appointment with that person. So on this particular thing, okay, when you know your purpose of the interview and you can share it with your interviewee, okay, so you can decide whom you want to interview, and you need to set up appointment with them or with that particular person. The third one is the speaker needs to decide whether or not to record the interview. Okay, if it is so important and you need to know word by word, okay, the information shared by the interviewee, so you need to decide whether that need to be recorded or not. Okay, but my suggestion is you need to get all your interviews to be recorded lah. So it's easier for you to focus on your interview without focusing on the process of jotting down information and so on. And then you can always have a look back later. Okay, if you don't quite remember things, so you can always go back to your recorded interview. And number 4, the most important task before the interview is preparing the questions to be asked. Seriously, if you are not preparing your questions protocol, interview protocol, so you will be drawn into informations being given by the interviewee, and unluckily, okay, at the end of the day, you found that the questions that you asked to your interview is not enough. Okay, the questions that you asked to interview are not reliable and not helping you in terms of enriching the idea in your speech later. A good interview involves these things. Rapport building. Okay, you need to have good opener like salam, and then say thanks to the interviewee for participating in your interview, and you hope that they can give you information that you want and so on. And then you need to start with primary questions, okay, big questions, and then secondary questions can be questions that try to prolong the idea that been captured in the words of the interviewee, okay. And then you need to have the strategy of open and closed questions. Okay, open questions will ask the interviewee, okay, to answer long. Okay, closed questions, maybe you require the interviewee to ask simply like yes or no, sure or not, and so on. And then you must have neutral questions, okay, and also leading questions. So these kind of things, I think you can get it yourselves from the other sources in the internet. Okay, the second stage of the interview process after the preparation process takes place during the interview itself. So it is important for you to dress appropriately and to show up on time. Okay, biar dia lambat, jangan aku lambat. Dengar gunakan tips yang saya guna untuk kelas saya tu kan. And then it is a good idea at the outset to restate the purpose of the interview so as to refresh the interviewee's memory. So before you start recording, before you start the session, maybe just before the session started, you might want to remind the interviewee that your interview will be like this, like that, the questions will be like this, like that, and so on. And then if the interviewee consents to having the interview recorded, okay, if they give the permission to record the interview, the equipment should be set up quickly and unnoticeably. The gadget that you have, maybe your handset or the voice recorder, must be set up quickly, okay, and if possible unnoticeably. Okay, the interviewer maybe will not be distracted by the gadget you have, okay, on the desk or on the table. Okay, make it unnoticeable. And then the most important part of the interview is asking the questions. Ask. Okay, in addition to asking good questions, the interviewer, you lah, must listen carefully to the answers, so that the interviewee will not repeat any same answers to any same questions that you give. And then the next one is the interviewer in addition the interviewer should try not to exceed the stipulated time period for the interview. If you have agreed to have the session for 1 hour. So make sure that it is not being prolonged to 1 hour and a half or 1 hour or 2 hours and so on. So make sure that you have the interview timely. Okay, the third stage of the interview process takes place after the interview. While the interview is still fresh, it has been ended maybe yesterday or just this morning. So you as the interviewer, the researcher, should review her or his notes. As soon as her or his note means your notes lah. And then as soon as possible after the interview, the researcher should transcribe ideas and information from the interview into the same format as the rest of her or his research notes. Transcribing process is so important. Apa itu transcribing process? The process of transforming whatever in the audio format into your written format. Okay. Alright. This is additional things also. Okay. Secondary sources of speech information can be what we call as factual statements. What is factual statements? These are those that can be verified. Among others, among the factual information or secondary sources which can give the oomph or give the strength to the primary source from the interview that you got in the interview. So you might want to add in some statistics. You might to add in some examples. Okay, apa itu statistics? Numerical facts lah. Examples adalah specific instances which illustrate or explain a general factual statement. And then a definition or expert opinions. Okay, apart from the interviewee's idea, you might want to put in some statistics. For instance, the interviewee gave you one information. Okay, 1 out of 3 students are so lazy to study, for example. And then you put some statistics to support or to object the idea of the interviewee just now. Okay, maybe you find any statistics from Universiti Sains Malaysia or from Kementerian Pengajian Tinggi which stated about the same ideas of 1 out of 3 students are lazy enough to study, kan? So those are what we call as statistics. And then you might want to put some examples. Yes, for instance, my housemates, some of them are so lazy to go to the library or to go to lectures, okay, and so on. So this is what we call as a factual statements which can be verified and also can help to boost up, okay, the reliability of the first source just now, the primary source. So that's all. I hope that you can understand whatever I have shared with you. So don't forget to read chapter 7 in Lucas' book for you to get a better idea of whatever I have lectured you through these slides. May Allah guide us all. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.